You know, Bill, there's one thing I've learned in all my years. Sometimes you gotta say, what the fuck?
Hey everybody, welcome to Real Ripe and Real Rotten. This is a podcast where we're taking a look at the highs and lows of your favorite Hollywood artists, and each month we're going to be using Rotten Tomatoes to determine the best and worst film in one individual's filmography. You can listen along, let us know your thoughts about it. We're talking about Tom Cruise this month. We talked about Cocktail, which is at 5% on Rotten Tomatoes. And now we're going to the heights of Tom Cruise, which is Risky Business, which I think is at 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. But Clay, this is Clay. I'm Wes. And Clay,
hey
how
guys.
are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You got done watching Risky Business today, I guess, judging by the tweet or the text you sent me.
Yes. Before that, I was ignorant, and they could smell it like dog shit. I have to say, this movie is actually very quotable, which I was not really expecting. But.
Yeah. I think the that line is considered to be one of the top, made into like the top 100 quotes. Or sometimes you just got to say, "Who gives a fuck?" or what the fuck. That line.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to say, "What the fuck." Mm-hmm. It is in AFI's 100 years list. So anyway, if you guys don't know, Risky Business is a 1983 American rom-com film. I feel romantic comedy is the wrong way to describe it. Written and directed by Paul Brickman, who makes his directorial debut, and I believe it's his last directing credit. It stars Tom Cruise and Rebecca De Mornay. It launched Tom Cruise to stardom. So, Clay, I think that a good place to start talking about Risky Business is that Risky Business is unlike any of the other movies that we've seen so far, in that I had a different reaction while I was watching it. I started off watching this movie, and it took me a while to realize what kind of a movie it was. And I was actually less impressed when I thought it was more just a straight up 1980s rom-com. And I was approaching it from that kind of perspective. And by the end of it, it had totally switched it around on me because I realized what kind of movie that they were actually making. And the way that I was watching it before with the rom-com filter on had me sort of picking up on all these weird choices that they were making and saying, like, why are they doing this? I don't really know if this movie's any good. I don't know if this is holding up. Like, why are these characters doing this kind of stuff? And why, for instance, why Tom Cruise gets this hooker over, and Tom Cruise is a high school kid, right? Who's supposed to be somewhat highfalutin, but maybe not too successful. And he basically fucks like a porn star. Like when he brings the girl over, and I was like, why is this happening? Like, why is this being written this way? It all changes once you start to realize, which took about halfway for me, that it's basically a very dark satire of growing up. And the movie got a lot better once I realized that. And I really like the ending, although I don't know if you watched the alternate ending or the true ending, but we can get to that when we get to it. But what were your general thoughts about Risky Business?
This one was kind of weird. I don't know if it ever really kind of cracked through with me, because the first maybe 20 minutes of it or so, it just felt like a fairly standard 80s teen comedy that was maybe had better actors in it than they usually do. Like, I thought Booger was really good, and I thought Balky was great. Tom Cruise, I think some of it might be I just don't really like young Tom Cruise because of the same thing we were talking about in Cocktail, where he feels like a blank mask. Yep. And anytime that I see him doing like sex stuff, it kind of creeps me out because he seems like he's such an asexual kind of just like thing. Yeah. That it's weird to see Tom Cruise being like romantic and like having sex with people. It's just weird for me.
He's not a See, I thought that I agree with you, and I thought that his performance here was very similar to Cocktail's performance, except for the fact that because this is such a satire, his sort of vapid acting style fit the material better on some way. Like he's almost not supposed to be a real person in this. Right. And I think that the characterization and the actor combination there works well because Cruise, as his acting style, always comes across as someone who's trying to impress other people.
Beautiful place you got here, Ralph. Is this all yours?
My folks, actually.
Do you know what it's worth?
A lot, probably.
Oh, yeah. Real estate? It's fabulous.
Look, Lana, my name really isn't Ralph. It's Joel.
Only $300, Joe.
And that's kind of what the Joel character is doing this entire movie. And I thought it fit really well. And as we were saying, it's surprising that Tom Cruise's highest and lowest are both so clear from the same generation of his life.
They're actually not that different from each other either.
No. My quote going into it was that to get sort of highfalutin, Cocktail is a movie where I think Risky Business is a film, if you want to make that distinction.
Right.
I liked Risky Business. I thought it was good. But yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You said they're similar.
No, yeah, I feel like they're pretty similar, and I that might just be representational of the time in which they were made. Because they're both kind of about like young entrepreneurs who are all about business, or at least that's kind of that aspect is there, and they end up doing things, being successful in ways that they're not expecting to. That's different from the norm and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think the difference is that Cocktail plays it pretty straight, whereas this one is definitely kind of taking a shot at that. And it's interesting because Cocktail takes place. It was from a few. Was that 87?
Yes, I think so.
And to have Risky Business kind of taking a shot at that mentality so early into the 80s is pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. It's weird that it went backwards. You think Cocktail almost feels like the earlier film type, and then this comes along and sort of satirizes Cocktail on some level, but it actually went the other way around.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I guess the satire aspect didn't stand out as much with me. There were some really interesting choices like that. I was starting to think like what's going on here, specifically during that sex scene, because it's
when the door blows open.
Yeah, it's like I mean clearly they're making some choices here, and then they have this montage of them having sex in like the most uncomfortable places you could possibly ever have sex.
Yeah, the back of Volkswagen. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have this. I was talking on the stairs, like the hardwood stairs.
Yeah, the hardwood. And then
in a really oversized chair.
His gamer chair.
Yeah. But I noticed that there's this trend of anytime that there's something quote unquote like adult with a capital A in it, like any sort of action involving him or even Rebecca De Mornay, they always like cut in a shot of like a baby picture.
Yeah. And
it was really interesting because it does kind of take away from any sort of like excitement of the scene.
It does. Yeah.
And it's a really interesting way to comment on I guess growing up, I guess to an extent. I'm not exactly sure what they were trying to say, but it does definitely make you kind of like take a step back from what you're watching and go like, oh yeah, these are kids, and it removes weird part of their life.
Removes the eroticism from it, like
yeah.
And it's a pretty hot sex. Like Rebecca De Mornay is gorgeous, basically. So and Tom Cruise is awkward as all hell in it, but it's like the sex scene is pretty intense, mostly because I feel like we don't really have sex scenes like that in movies anymore, and the way that. They smash it back by showing you the pictures of the kids to show you that my understanding of what this movie is saying is that he is a child until he has sex, and sex is the thing that sort of vaults him into adulthood by indirect means. And so the symbolism of that is to show that that's his sort of, that's the transitional period that he's gone through, and that everything's going to be different from that.
I would say I think my reading might be a little bit different. I think it might be more for me that it's symbolic of him kind of getting in over his head.
Yes.
Because that's basically what happens to him. He seems like he's got it all figured out. He thinks he knows what's going on. He thinks he knows how he's gaming the system, but he's really being gamed by himself the entire time.
Yeah, well, I think that ties into the becoming adult. What the movie's saying is about becoming adult is when you realize that life is kind of unfair on some level. Like the things start to, he no longer has his parents giving him everything, and he's just having a great time partying by himself, and like nothing can go wrong for him. After he has sex, everything conspires against him. And he realizes that in order to succeed, he needs to screw back against life on some way. Like he needs to fight back against it.
Right.
And that's where the darkness of the ending comes from, because you realize that, well, we'll get to which ending did you see? Did you see the ending where they're in the park with each other at the very end?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the theatrical ending, which I still thought was good. There's an alternate ending where the last scene is them in the restaurant right before that. And instead of cutting to the park, he sort of summons her over to sit on his lap, and she sits on his lap. And they have a similar last line about, like, my name is Joel. I made $8,000 in one night. And then he has some line about, like, here's looking at you, kid, or something. He says something like that. They have a similar line reading, except he says something more negative about it at the end. It's a little bit darker of an ending. It's a little bit more ambiguous. And I think it all kind of piles into that aspect. And the reason that I was
just going to say, do they still cut it in with the young entrepreneurs sequence at the end?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So it's all...
Well, I was just going to say, because I actually really like that. I like that ending. Because that was I felt like that was the most the clearest satire moment for me was that sequence at the end where they're cutting back to the young entrepreneurs thing and showing how ridiculous these contraptions that people are selling to make $500 are compared to the actual ways of the world work. How these kids are kind of wasting their time doing their perceived idea of what business is versus what it really is.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the ending scene with those kids is funny to me because do you watch Shark Tank?
I have in the past, but not really.
Yeah, I only watch it every once in a while, and like Shark Tank is funny because as someone who has like no real sort of like economically socialist views, who thinks like I generally like capitalism and generally that it's like led to better things. Listening to people pitch products on Shark Tank makes me ardently so angry against consumerism and capitalism because it's like, imagine if if these people used all their energy to something productive on some level, like instead of just making, I think one of the things in the film is like a napkin holder or something that dispenses the napkins. And it's I enjoy the fact that the film smashes those things together because it does kind of show you the cheesy aspect that's a part of consumerism if you really just kind of describe it as to what it is and what people are building and buying from each other. And it pairs it off against the, as you say, the realization of what Tom Cruise has at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, and it actually, again, it is kind of similar to Cocktail in that both of these characters are put think they are doing the right thing by going along the lines of what society is in his case in Risky Business. His parents are saying the route that they're being told they should take through, going to classes about business and going to school and all this kind of stuff. But it's only when they decide to do their own thing and really put their boots on the ground, so to speak, is when they become successall.
Yeah.
In Cocktail, it's a fairly literal thing, and in this one, it's a tongue-in-cheek kind of dark, ironic sort of thing.
Yeah. I'll read the quote now so people don't get upset. But the real quote is at the end of the movie, "My name is Joel Goodson. I deal in human fulfillment. I grossed over $8,000 in one night. Time of your life, huh, kid?" The alternate ending has him say, they dine at the same restaurant, have a similar conversation. "Was our night together just a setup?" he asks Lana, and she says no, then adds, "Why does this have to be so tough?" He summons her to come over and sit on his lap, which she does. The camera pulls back to reveal a stunning view of Lake Michigan. While she's on his lap, the couple embrace, and Joel's voiceover is exactly the same. He says, "My name is Joel Goodson. I deal in human fulfillment. I grossed over $8,000 in one night." except it ends with "Isn't life grand?" A sort of sarcastic yet subtle and ambiguous ending. So they're not totally different from each other. Apparently the director had such a difficult time going with the studio ending, which is the one that's theatrical, that he basically gave up on Hollywood at that point.
Wow.
It doesn't seem that different where I'd be sort of holding my guns and never wanting to work on things again, but
right.
It's interesting anyway. And I think that going back to it, the movie, the thing that sort of revealed what the movie was to me, because I was watching with these 2018 eyes, and after Tom Cruise meets with Rebecca De Mornay, and there's like all these scenes with the prostitutes, right? I was thinking of a modern sensibility, how odd it was that they don't comment on the prostitution angle, really. Like them being prostitutes is almost incidental to everyone else in the movie. Like they don't comment on it. You don't really see. You see the pimp, which is a almost unrecognizable Joey Pantaleone, Joey Pants, and you don't really see that negative of an aspect of it. They're having a lot of sex. There's no disease or anything. There's no sort of broken emotions. There's no problems with anything that's going on. And then I realized that the prostitutes are really just kind of a symbol for things at this point. And that's why the movie doesn't really go into what they're doing. Their job and occupation is really symbolic and really just an ends to a means of creating this event that cascades everything to the other side.
Yeah, and they keep kind of popping up out of nowhere. I mean, it's apparently really easy to get a lot of prostitutes very quickly.
and the your friends have a lot of walking around money that they can just drop on prostitutes.
Yeah, everybody's got savings bonds, I guess, that they're cashing out to sleep with some prostitutes.
That was maybe the part of the movie that hadn't aged all that well, is that you having to go down to the bank and cash out your savings bond.
Is that still a thing? Do people still do savings bonds?
I don't think so. I think the ROI is so bad that no one really does it anymore. I don't know what people do at this point for like investing for kids and stuff like that. I certainly don't do any of that.
I buy two. I buy two of every comic book, and I buy three of every comic book, and I burn two of them.
Right.
That's how you drive up the market, by creating scarcity.
That's exactly right. That's supply and demand, I think, at that point. Yeah, and I think that it's I think that even the soundtrack in this movie is good in a way that I didn't like the soundtrack to Cocktail. This is the opposite, where this had a lot of really good 80s songs in it, and they're all very somber songs. It's the Phil Collins In the Air Tonight is up there. It's
B+ usage of In the Air Tonight. I don't think it's quite as good as Miami Vice, but it's good.
No, yeah, it's definitely not as good. And it's it has the tracks are very somber and sort of the best kind of I don't want to be that specific, but very like introspective and sort of moody, atmospheric music.
Yeah, they actually kind of fit the movie better than they did in Cocktail, which was just like, hey, remember the 50s?
Yeah, right. We've got all these stuff, and I think that works. And I thought that, I don't know, this is, to me, it's not a movie that I'd really rewatch, but I think that it's very good. You know what I mean? And maybe you're a little bit more negative. I didn't really have fun watching it, but after I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that was a pretty impressive movie on some level. It gets more. You can understand the sort of hype about Cruise and that director at that point, as opposed to Cocktail, which I wouldn't have understood doing anything, and it obviously didn't. It was terrible.
I think talking through it here is actually making me appreciate it a little bit more. Because I texted you as I was watching it saying that I was pretty bored by it. And I think it's because I wasn't really reading it as much more than a 80s comedy, 80s teen sex comedy, really.
Yeah.
And talking through it, I can see, I can see why it's a little bit more thoughtful than that.
And I'd agree it's not a very good 80s teen comedy.
Yeah, I still think it feels kind of stiff.
Yeah.
A lot of the scenes feel stiff. Man, Bronson Pinchot is fucking amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
He's like, he doesn't do a lot, but he does a lot in the scenes that he's in.
Yes.
Like when they're putting the stuff back at the end and they're trying to rearrange the china cabinet, and he says the line about you shouldn't mix centuries. It's like, oh my God, it's such a tiny little improv that was just so damn good. But like, you know, it feels a little stiff. I guess not really much more stiff than these movies felt at the time. I mean, is this really any more stiff than like Fast Times at Ridgemont High or something like that? I don't know.
Well, I feel that it's a little bit. I guess I would describe it as stiff because if you watch it with that kind of a mindset, it doesn't come across as particularly trying to make a lot of internal sense. Like it's a little bit detached from reality in that way, in the way that people don't comment on things that happen. It doesn't expect these characters to react to their situation in a realistic way, quote unquote. It's more thematic than that.
Well, yeah, I was kind of fascinated by the choices that they were making because, I mean, even from the very beginning, they're presenting the story in a not entirely realistic way. Like it's stylized in a lot of points, like whether it's zooming out of his eyeball or that first person camera shot when he's driving their parents are driving to the airport. Like there's, it is sort of, I wouldn't say dreamlike, but it is not as literal as a lot of these movies ends up being. And at first, I think I just sort of was reading that as, oh, here's an interesting way to handle this stuff. Because, I mean, the first person thing with the parents was nice because it kind of, it does, I guess what I'm trying to say is I wasn't sure if it was trying to go for heightened realism of that stuff.
Yep.
Because the parents are sort of a heightened version of parents who are, they are overly concerned but also aloof at the same time.
Yes. Well, they are, to me, they represent the materialistic thing that Tom Cruise eventually becomes through this. So the father opens it by being very upset that they've tinkered with his stereo system, and like the whole drive of the movie is about protecting his mother's egg thing, trying to get that egg back.
Right.
And the egg breaks at the very end. And after all that Tom Cruise has gone through, the mother is more just very upset that the egg is cracked. It's all for naught because this good is no longer available to her and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's also, it's very odd. Even the dream sequence at the beginning is very kind of out there. And, I guess the dream sequence is sort of indicative of the movie as a whole a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Let me know what you think about it. I thought the film felt very dream sequency. And in a way, if you could almost convince me if you wrote a good enough essay that this is the younger version of the Tom Cruise from Eyes Wide Shut.
Interesting. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I got a similar kind of dreamy vibe from both of them, where neither movie feels like it takes place in reality and it's about this guy's journey. Yeah,
I could see that, definitely. It's sort of, it's tough because I'm trying to place where, without looking it up, where this comes out in the history of the like teen sex comedy, because those things are usually played very literally and they are very over the top. And unbelievable. And this one is played, there's still a lot of like over the top unbelievable stuff, but it's not presented in an entirely literal way. But at the same time, they don't comment on it at all, like you're saying about the prostitutes or like
the car chase scene is a big example.
Yeah, the car chase scene, or even something as simple as after the very first scene where he and his friends are playing poker and they're drinking beer and smoking cigars.
Yeah,
and they're like 16, right?
Yeah,
and I mean, I guess that's not as big of a taboo then as it was now, but it still feels kind of weird. Like they're doing, I guess I'm liking this more now that I'm talking about it out loud because I'm thinking that scene in and of itself is also them kind of acting like adults.
Yes, it's them pretending to be grown up.
Yeah, they're like Balky is terrible at smoking a cigar. He's like just chewed the fuck out of that thing.
They're talking about sex awkwardly.
Yeah.
He's jumping away.
And like I noticed that they go out of their way to have they're drinking beer, but there's also like diet soda there too.
Yep.
So maybe this movie is really good.
it's one of those weird, like it's not I wouldn't say it's super rewatchable. I wouldn't say that I really enjoyed. I did enjoy it. I didn't mind watching it, but I'm certainly not the one that I'm really going to ever pop on a whim, or like if I catch it midway through on TV, I wouldn't stop and watch it on some level. But I think it's more clever than, it's almost too subtle for the cleverness of what they're trying to do on some ways.
I think maybe that's it. Although, yeah, it's tough because I mean, you know,
if it was more obvious, I might like it less, I suppose.
Yeah, like it's not like a Better Off Dead where it's really like clearly over the top, or like Heathers or something where it's really clearly over the top and it's like, don't you know that it's like satire with a capital S.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, when you kind of break it down, it does work pretty well. Like the Booger's character there, I'm sorry, I shouldn't, Curtis Armstrong, that's his name. It's just easy shorthand. Booger and Balky are easy shorthands.
He's the little curly haired guy.
Yeah, for the young people listening to this, if there are any, those are references that don't make any sense.
He kind of reminds me of the kid with curly hair from Stranger Things on some level.
Yeah.
But
he's almost like this weird not Obi-Wan, like a Merlin type figure where he's like smarter than everybody else, and he only kind of appears at moments where Tom Cruise needs like guidance.
Yes.
And he's giving him all this advice that's like very sage-like advice, but he also has no experience.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting dynamic. I would say if you watched it once, I would say you could get another viewing out of it just to kind of reassess some of the stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
But this is by no means would be like something I would just throw on every day. I was also thinking, I'm actually really surprised that Bob Seger dance sequence became as iconic as it did.
Yes.
It's kind of weird and kind of goofy.
And it's a weird outfit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's just like it's not particularly, I mean, I guess he's still in the kid phase at that point, right? So you're probably supposed to view it more as a kid sort of playing dress up with like his daddy's dress shirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's obviously oversized.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah. And he's like, the white underwear is kind of diaper-like, you know what I mean? Like and so it's that kind of thing. I wonder if Cruise is the right actor for that. That was my only thing that stuck out, is like, I don't know if Tom Cruise was right for that aspect. Although, are we supposed to think it's as awkward as I found it this time and not iconic on some level? Yeah,
that's the thing. I'm surprised it became such a marker of reference, because like it's not a particularly good scene,
right?
Like it's not like it's this amazing dance sequence or something, like, you know, it's just
right. Or the like camera work is so like following. It's not like an amazingly shot sequence or anything.
Yeah, I guess to be fair, the only thing that gets referenced is the sliding into frame with the piano intro, which I can see that being fairly iconic. But even so, it's just, I mean, it's such a small bit of the movie that I'm surprised that stuck out as much as it did.
Yeah. And I guess maybe you mentioned the sex on the stairs. I'm just realizing now that's kind of that's the turning point, having sex on the stairs, between the childishness of the lower floor and all the adult conversations he has in his bedroom later on.
Mm-hmm. You mean his bedroom where he has a constantly blinking checks cashed sign? Like, no wonder he can't sleep. That thing's right above his head.
That's actually funny. That's one of my takeaways, is that when I was watching it, the nights are very long in this movie, and people have no problem just sort of getting up in the middle of the night and doing something, like going off to do something else. He does a lot of sort of wandering around at night and getting up and doing different things while the nighttime is surrounding them.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated when movies, like, not that they have to, but when it's nighttime in a movie, you kind of always assume it's late.
Yes.
And in a movie like this, and I've seen a lot of other movies do it, where it's like they do a lot of shit. Like it seems like it's really late, and then they're like, let's go get ice cream.
Yeah.
Right. And they apparently drive to Chicago and go get ice cream in Chicago, which is probably like an hour and a half drive or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure the screenplay says exterior dusk or something like that.
Yeah,
and it just doesn't come across.
Even like there's one scene that really stood out to me as far as day and night goes, is after he gets suspended, his friends are outside waiting for him, and they're at the school, but it's nighttime. And I was like, so
Oh, that's true.
Is it that was he there like doing mock trial or something, and he just got out and it's like 7? It was just a very strange. You would think that scene would take place like at the end of the school day outside.
Right. Yeah. That is maybe his young entrepreneur meeting went late or something like that.
Yeah.
A couple of those weird scenes, like he basically strangles the nurse, which is interesting. Maybe it's not as interesting in '83 when they did it, but the first prostitute he meets is a transvestite male.
Yeah, I was gonna say surprisingly few cringeworthy jokes.
No jokes about it. They treat it totally as, and Tom Cruise isn't really even all that upset. But he's more upset that a prostitute has showed up than it's a cross-dressing prostitute,
right?
If it, or maybe transvestite. I don't think it's
and
clear.
I was honestly surprised, and pardon my language, that nobody called anybody else a fag. I was very surprised. I was expecting at least one of those.
Yeah. I think that's an indicator of where the material is different for this movie. It's not that generic rom-com-y type thing, and I was surprised by it. They treated it very, it was fairly respectful treatment of the material on some level. And Tom Cruise is not. Tom Cruise is more bothered that a prostitute has showed up at his parents' house than he is by anything else about that scene.
Yeah. Oh, and kind of touching back on the doing grown-up things before he becomes grown-up kind of thing. I got a good chuckle out of when he sits down to eat dinner and he pours himself like a pint glass full of scotch because my dad actually told me about a story about he actually did that. He did the exact same thing. Yeah, like I think when he went off to college, he bought like a bottle of whiskey because his dad used to drink whiskey all the time, and he poured himself a giant glass of whiskey, and he got so sick that he didn't drink whiskey again for like 3 years or something. That's how that scene should have ended, is with him puking in the toilet for like 4 hours.
Eating a TV. I like that scene too. I like the bit that Cruise does. He pulls out like the still frozen dinner and just eats it like basically like a popsicle. He pulls like the entire thing out and just eats it whole hog there.
Which on the one hand, I was kind of thinking like, dude, you're not 7. You know how frozen dinners work, but
you know if it's still a frozen dinner by the time you pull it out of the microwave.
But they do follow that up later with him eating with the girls, and they are eating TV dinners that have been cooked.
Yes.
So
He's
I guess
made progress.
he has made progress.
She's only kidding. I hope so. Look, Joe, you look like a smart kid. So I'm going to tell you something which I'm sure you'll understand. Now, you're having fun now, right? Right, Joe? Time of your life. In a sluggish economy, never, ever fuck with another man's livelihood. Now, if you're smart, like I hope you are, you're not gonna make me come back here.
Yeah, and then it wraps it up by the the sort of turning point is he realizes that he needs to sell. He can use prostitution to make ends meet. He basically becomes a brothel. A madam of a brothel. I don't know what the male version of a madam of a brothel would be. I guess a pimp, but a madam sounds more regal. And then he has the Princeton guy come in. Which what would you think of the whole Princeton interview sequence in the context of everything that we've talked about up to this point?
Yeah, I liked it. Now that I'm thinking back on it as we've been talking it out, I was like, that's actually a really, really good scene because it's such a stereotypical kind of teen comedy kind of scene to have, where he has to meet with the stuffy college admissions guy
while he's throwing a wild party in the background.
But then to set it and have it go off so well, even though the Princeton, even though there's the house is now a bordello for the night.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I thought it was a nice. It's a good subversion of that kind of thing. I think.
Yeah, I think that it would. I think that it works. I like the fact that the interviewer doesn't really bring up what's going on around him in any way. He kind of watches it, and you don't really sure if he's really on the same level as to what's going on. Eventually it is, because he sleeps with a couple of the prostitutes that night too, and then ends up giving Tom Cruise.
Those poor women. Those poor women. Like there's one shot at the end where they are just, there's like 5 of them sitting on a bench and they are just wiped out. And I was like, yeah, I don't blame you. He says he made $8,000 that night. Is that, I wonder if that's after what he paid the girls, because there was a lot of girls there. And if you're, in order for anybody to come out of that situation with like a decent amount of money, there either had to have been a shitload of guys there.
Yep.
Or they had to be charging a shitload of money.
They don't really comment on it, which might have been in fitting with the material, I guess, if they had commented, or maybe if they hadn't. But the portion that Tom Cruise is, because Tom Cruise has realized that the way to make money is to sort of maybe break with the ethics of his situation. Sort of like he needs to. They're not really concerned about the ethics, but just about what it will take to make that amount of money is something that Tom Cruise is willing to cross at that point. Mm-hmm. And the defeated look on the girls' faces and everything kind of lines up with all of that stuff. And then he meets the Guido character, Joey Pants, who did Pants have like a bad cocaine habit at this point or something?
The actor?
Yeah, he looks he's so skinny in this. And it
was also 35 years ago.
That's true. That's true. I'm thinking of it was a decade after The Matrix, a little bit more than a decade. He just looks like he's much younger. It took me a long time to realize it was actually him.
Wait, a decade after The Matrix?
A decade before. Sorry. Well, a little bit more than what's The Matrix? 90 is probably more than
99.
99. Okay, so 16 years. Never mind. It's almost 2 decades. But he meets this pimp who is basically shows Tom Cruise the way that you have to proceed, basically, to the way how the corners you have to cut, kind of the ethics that you get to ignore if you want to be successful and make that money. And he does it by robbing Tom Cruise's house and then selling everything back to him, because that could be seen as some sort of metaphor for business on some level, I suppose.
Yeah, do you think? I did like, as we've been talking about, these different themes. I did like the undercutting of Tom Cruise, in that usually in these movies the zany scheme ends up working out in everybody's favor, and or at least in the favor of the main character.
Yeah, and
it was nice to see him think that he's got it made, but then just get the rug pulled out from under him, almost literally.
Yes.
Do you think Rebecca De Mornay was in on it?
Yes, she was. And I think that the alternate ending clarifies that when she says, "Why is this so difficult?" Because I don't know if the ending really captures the fact that their relation. I think the walk in the park hints at it, because Tom Cruise is being sort of playfully difficult with her by saying, like, maybe I should charge you and that kind of thing. I think the real theme of that is that he should be seriously telling her, I should charge you. You know what I mean? Like, go
ahead.
Well, he's built, her being in on this showed him that even love can be compromised as an adult. Like, that's the lesson he learns from it. And it sort of hardens him to a point. And he realizes that their relationship is not really built on anything except for that sort of mutual exploitation of each other.
Right, and it would go along. I can see why the director would have been so forceful about the ending, because the way that it ends as the theatrical ending makes it seem like there is
a future.
Yeah, there is a future with them, or there is like a genuine relationship possibility there.
Yeah,
whereas
at least camaraderie between each other. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas if you're watching this movie, I mean, with any foot in reality, if you're watching it from reality point of view and not from the point of view of like literally every other romantic comedy, like a Pretty Woman point of view, you're thinking there's no fucking way that these two people, like, there's no relationship there.
Right.
Like, she was scamming him. He was they were using each other. Like, that's not a relationship. That's not a real relationship. So I can see why the kind of cliche-ness of the kind of rom-com-y ending that they did do, I can see why that would be so negative. Upsetting to the director, because clearly that's not what he intended.
Yeah,
it kind of undercuts the whole thing if you think about it.
It does. I was surprised that, like, I thought that they kind of mediated a little bit just by the lightheartedness of the Tom Cruise dialogue at the end. I agree that I think the original ending sounds like a better idea in a more realistic way. It's on YouTube. People can look at it. It feels much darker because it doesn't end on that upbeat type thing at the end, even though Tom Cruise is he is hitting the themes of it by being sarcastically talking about money with her, but it's not she needs to be more upset by the end of what's gone on, I think, than she is at the very end there. And I think that the director's cut ending is a better ending for that way.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, but yeah, you can check it out on YouTube, that ending. That's pretty much it. I think we'll wrap this one up. It's been it's been an interesting movie to watch, I think. I think that it's not anything like what I remembered. I'm not sure I've actually ever seen the movie all the way through because I remembered it much more as a rom-com comedy type story. But I think that it's a interesting sort of very 80s take, a cynical take on the 80s, I think, in a lot of ways. And it's a nice little dark satire that eventually turns out interestingly, I think. And it's a movie worth thinking about, I suppose, would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it is. I've seen it at least once before, but not for a long time, probably not in like 15 years or so. So I didn't really remember. I remember liking it, but I didn't really remember much about it. But yeah, it's a good, now that I've kind of seen what you were talking about, it is a good undercut of that whole thing of the teen comedy, and it is a good satire of what turning into an adult kind of is. Like there's something really fun and juvenile in the idea that you would just call up a prostitute and then they would just show up at your house.
Yeah.
Like you leave a message on the phone and then they just drive an hour and a half to your house, like completely, like it's very naive. It's a very naive, and it's almost like the fact that happens fits with that section of the movie because that it is, all of that stuff is very naive up to that point.
Well, right. It's no problems, right? Getting her there in the first place until they have sex and everything like that. She shows up alone. There's like everything goes perfectly for them. After that, however, all the sort of problems of it start popping up, right? Like she's got friends that are going to start coming over. He runs into the pimp and all that stuff. Like it's the switch of the childlike wonder of the whole situation turns into the realization of these are all the problems that stem from it as an adult that you get to realize and learn about. And so I think it fits in that kind of a way too. That's kind of a neat little twist for it.
Yeah, and 3 years later, if they made this movie, there would have been a whole nother gigantic problem that they had to deal with, given the amount of premarital sex that's happening in this movie. That would have been a much darker ending.
That's the original director's cut there. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. We're done with Tom Cruise. I put up the next one. What is it? Steven Spielberg, E.T. and Hook are the plus and the negatives.
You know what? I bet those are flipped than what I think they should be, because not that I think Hook is his pinnacle or anything, but I don't think Hook is as bad as people make it out to be. But I do not like E.T. To be fair, I've only seen it once very, very long ago, and I did not like it as a kid. And I feel like if I didn't like it as a kid, I'm not going to like it now.
Yeah, I have a similar opinion of E.T., actually. I haven't seen it recently or well enough to tell you everything that goes on in the movie, so I'm sure I'm missing something of it. But growing up, I always felt a little bit annoyed when people wanted to watch E.T. I remember that for some reason.
And how is that his highest rated movie?
Well, the actual highest was just the re-release of Close Encounters, but the original theatrical release of Close Encounters was a little bit lower than it. So I decided to go with E.T. as the original, the true rating to go by there.
Like, how is Jaws not higher than E.T.?
I think they're all 90-something percent.
Yeah, I was going to say, are they all within like a tenths of a point?
Yeah, they're all. It's honestly probably E.T. was 98 and Jaws would be 97, something like that. Like they were very, very close to each other. There's a lot of options there with Steven Spielberg. People didn't want to see Oliver Stone, I guess, for some Oliver Stone's movies were the weirdest.
Yeah, that would be fascinating. If I had to guess, Oliver Stone movies, highest one, JFK?
No. I had not heard of either of them.
Really?
And James Woods is in his highest.
Oh, I don't know. The lowest one like Savages or whatever that one that came out a couple years ago was?
No, it's called The Hand with Michael Caine.
Oh, yeah. that doesn't really count. That's like his first movie he ever made.
Yeah, I think it's his second movie. It's a horror movie, right?
Yeah.
Or something? Yeah.
What's
And
the highest?
His
one?
highest rated is Salvatore.
Oh, yeah.
He's like a wartime photographer or something.
Yeah,
James Woods.
that movie. I've never seen it, but I think I remember seeing the video box at the store and being just walking by like, oh, nope.
That was I guess the difference is, Oliver Stone made The Hand, and then his like next movie was The Salvatore, and that's when he started getting political in his movies. And so that
was his very next movie?
I don't know if it was they're very close to each other in terms of timeline, so it might have been or it might not have been.
I'm surprised it's not Platoon. Because he won the Academy Award for that, I think, or somebody did.
I would have thought it would have been Platoon, but it obviously it is not. Anyway, guys, check out all the social media links. You can go to patreon.com/thepensky-file if you want to support the show. That's always much appreciated. And that's how you vote on the topics that we discuss. So if you're interested in doing that, you can become a patron on Patreon. Other than that, we get the Captain Tier shout-outs. The highest level supporters on Patreon: Vincent Adultman, Stephen Cobb, Holly McLaughlin, Carrie Mobility, Doug Valcamp, Michael Pond, Bradley Killens, Rune Vendler, Jay Stanley, Mike Burnett, Matthew Ross, Magpie Nest Productions, Ben Douglas, Kyle Barrett, Joint Mango, Tarek Latif. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. And thank you very much.
Are we doing the non sequitur ending for this one too?
We can if you come up with one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's no feeling more embarrassing in your life. I don't know if people out there have experienced this than breaking a toilet seat.
Were you in the throes of some horrible?
No, I guess it was just an old seat. It was kind of worn out, and then you're doing whatever, and then it just like snapped, and I was like, oh my god.
Do you slam the toilet seat down?
No.
Okay.
Nope. It was just, shift your weight a certain way, and then it just, snapped. And I was like, oh, God, that's really embarrassing. Because then you got to, like, explain, especially if you're living with somebody, you got to explain that. And that's no fun, because, you feel bad about yourself, and then,
feel bad about the replacement process here, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, if you go to the store and you got to buy a new toilet seat, there's like 5 things that could make you have to buy a new toilet seat, and you get judged for all of them.
It's a disgusting replacement process too. We have like the wing nuts on our toilet seat. One of them gets loose all the time. You got to like reach under there and grab this gunky thing. And it's really not that great of a replacement value, I don't think. Let me see. What would my non sequitur be? I'm going to be looking out. My little nephew was visiting, and Modi had sent me a Star Trek game, and he also included a Captain Picard doll.
Oh, nice.
And so my cousin, or my little nephew was playing with it, and he's just starting to learn, and his first word is banana. And he came up and he saw the doll, pointed at it, and said banana. So apparently Captain Picard looks like a banana to people.
Come on, kid. He's not even wearing the yellow suit.
I told him to show some respect, and then I threw him out of the house.
Yeah, I'll tell you. That kid sounds dumb.
Well, Captain Banana is on his way. Clay's getting a new toilet seat, and we're going to be back with E.T. and what the hell was the other? Hook. Those are the next two. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time.
My name is Joel Goodson. I deal in human fulfillment. I grossed over $8,000 in one night. Time of your life, huh, kid?